Yeah. So,
Ho, ho, ho.
oh dear.
There we are. That's my attempt at festivity. There we
Is
are.
that what it is? Yeah, I can see all your decoration in the background. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's my decoration, the vegan flag. That's what we need. The only
I was just
decoration
thinking
we
about
need.
these countdowns, Ronnie. I'm not quite sure that they're very good for us at our age. It's just like watching your life tick away 1 second at a time, isn't it?
It's like watching a heart monitor or something, isn't it? Anyway, I'll take that off because I'll put that back on in a few days' time. There we are.
Yeah, you don't want to get a sweaty head now, do you, Ronnie?
No, that's all too easily happens to me, especially with a hot curry.
Got Philip in the house. Ho ho ho, indeed. So so hello everybody. Welcome along. This is number 9. Actually,
I think it might be number 10. I think it might be number 10. Roger. I noticed that one of them weren't numbered. I think we're.
No, that was just. I think that was just the.
No, there was 2. There was 2.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like it don't matter anyway.
Well, I'm not going to change all the.
No, you can't change all the
things
that have already. No, it don't matter. Call it
a
special one.
The poster for this week really caused a lot of confusion because people couldn't work out which person was you and which one was Keanu Reeves. Ronnie, they were getting mixed up. Which is understandable.
He is a little bit older than me, Keanu. I know that.
Is he? Yeah.
And his acting skills. His acting skills aren't equivalent to mine, as everyone knows.
So who's in the house? So Benny was first. So that must be a first for you, Benny, to be first. Ethically based ex-omnivore. Roger Yates. Yeah, that's me. Benny again.
Good. It's good you know that, Roger.
Hiya, vegan pioneers. Canadian vegan forever. Hello. Joanna Tech, thank you for being here and keeping all the naughty channels at bay. Galaxy Vegan. Philip Murphy from New York, as Wendy likes to say. And I think that might be everybody.
Hello to everyone.
No plant powered. That's interesting.
Good.
A new one. Hello. So where are you coming in? Somewhere on one of the. See, this is going out on multiple channels. Did you say you might be rethinking that, Ronnie? In the sense that we're not quite sure whether having too many channels is a bit confusing for people or something.
It may be. I mean, I find that far more people tend to watch the shares of it. I always share it widely on Facebook, and a lot more people tend to watch the shares because obviously they're not tied to a specific time. And I know that in many countries throughout the world at the time this is going out, a lot of people are at work and won't be able to watch it live. So there is that kind of restraint on a live stream, although it does enable people to interact, which is a good aspect.
Yeah. Hey, look at this, Barnsley vegan. So that's where my mother was
Barnsley
born.
vegan. Is that
Barnsley
hopefully not the only Barnsley vegan? I would think there's.
The first Barnsley vegan. I don't know. So as you can see, folks, from the sign or from the title of the show, Ronnie's been making up words again. So how do you pronounce this one, Ronnie?
Well, I pronounce it SUPREMATRIX. I mean, you could call it SUPREMATRIX, but that looks like an advert for from a bedding company, doesn't it? So
it is a bit,
SUPREMATRIX, I call it.
Yes. Right. Well, now that we've got a few in the house, as we say, 1, 2 were just mentioned, and we'll put this up a couple of times. Mel Broughton is either didn't get bail or has been put back on remand about 4 days ago. And as far as we're aware, he's going to be remanded for the duration of the holiday. So it'll probably be up until mid-January. So it's a pretty shitty time to be in prison. So if you'd like to get yourself a pen and paper or something and jot that down, then it's always great to receive mail when you're inside, and particularly around the Christmas period. I don't know that was right for you, Ronnie, was it?
Yes, I mean, it did cheer me up getting mail, and I'd say to people, even if you can't write a great deal, if you just send Mel, well, it'd be a bit late now to send him a Christmas card, but you could certainly send him a New Year card. And any bit of post like that it's always always
Yeah.
in
What
jail.
prisoners tend to do is they kind of tend to stick them on the wall as decorations, don't they, and stuff.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I certainly did that with with cards.
Were you allowed to have things like blue tack, Ronnie? Because we weren't. So we used to use toothpaste.
I think I used something like toothpaste to stick stuff on.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
think you
right.
get blue tack. I mean, whatever I used was pretty strong because I'd put up big posters. I mean, when I was in Long Lartin, which is long-term prison in this kind of well, in Worcestershire, which is like not too far away from where I live now, actually, in kind of southwest England, for people who kind of don't know the area. I had every single space in my cell was covered with pictures or posters. Even the ceiling, I had posters on the ceiling, and some of these were quite thick posters. So whatever I used to hold them up was kind of pretty strong.
It sounds very Shawshank Redemption to me, Ronnie.
Kind of. Yeah, guys used to come to see my cell. They'd heard that the fame of my decorated cell went far and wide, and guys used to come and say, "Can I have a look at your cell? I've heard."
Yeah,
it's like
what was that
stuff.
There was that kids program called, was it Rainbow, where they had that big zippy character with the
I think so.
Yeah, because somebody sent me a really big poster, and it's kind of scrawled on it, kind of please get out of prison soon, Roger, kind of thing. And this guy came and he was looking at all this stuff, and he was going,
they were really quite fascinated with it all. It did look good. It made it cozy, of course, covering up all the bare walls with posters and stuff. It was, and I had a rule that every day I stuck one thing up. It was like a kind of
like a finger.
Yeah. A bit careful about that in there, though.
There's Benny showing his age. Look at that Rackle Welsh poster around in prison. You'll be lucky to get one of those.
I didn't want to expend my energy in that way, really.
Yeah, you'll be lucky to get one of those now.
Now,
the question here, Ronnie, before we move on, where is it?
Yeah, I mean, please write. Please do write to Mel. Or
it's
send him a card or something. It really.
So do you want to explain who Mel Broughton is?
Yeah, Mel Broughton's a long-term animal liberation activist, mainly focusing on anti-vivisection. I first met him in the early 1990s, when he was really quite a young chap, and he became active in campaigns against a laboratory that was being built in Cambridge, where they succeeded in getting it stopped, and then another one connected with Oxford University, where they kind of didn't succeed in stopping that one, but they've got an ongoing campaign against that. And in connection with the campaign against the construction of the Oxford laboratory, Mel ended up receiving a very long prison sentence. I think it may have been 10 years, possibly more than that. He got for that. A campaign called Speak, which was SPEAK. That was the kind of name of the campaign.
It was spelled both ways, wasn't it, at one point?
Because it was C.
To do with Cambridge.
The C originally stood for Cambridge. When it moved to Oxford, they changed it to a K, and it was about people giving voice to their, opposition to this laboratory being built. And when he got out of prison, he kind of carried on campaigning. He's still involved in hunt sabs. He's been attacked several times while hunt sabbing, and he's received some really quite,
he's been
bad injuries.
He's been in hospital about 4 times.
Yeah, he's a very courageous guy. Will kind of go in there, even though kind of he's obviously not, he's younger than me, but he's not a young guy. No. Very, very, very brave, very committed guy.
I think the heaviest target him now. I mean,
well, they're cowards, aren't they? So they see somebody that's like kind of a bit older. Yeah, they're cowards, yes, so they will go for people like that. And he's still very much in campaigning against animal experimentation, and it's in connection with that he's in prison at the moment.
So Sky is saying, I wonder if a letter from the US would make it.
It would make it. Yeah, it
won't make it for Christmas, obviously, but it would.
When prisoners are on remand, there tends to be fewer restrictions on letters. I mean, I know when I was in prison, even when I was a convicted
and even if he gets out in the meantime, they'll send it back on, won't they? So
yeah, I think it probably will. But I think he's in, sadly, for he may not get bail at all before his trial, and that could be ages. I think he may have exhausted all opportunities.
Yeah, because he's been remanded, I think, or he's been refused bail. But that that's the end of it, because he'll probably have to go back in mid-January, and then they'll probably.
Yeah, I think the reason he has been refused bail because years ago he went on the run, didn't turn up at court or something when he was supposed to.
People who do that, I hate them. I mean, it's terrible, isn't it, going on the run?
I don't know why anyone would go on the run.
No,
I know you never would. You wouldn't go on the run at all, would you, Roger? But you'd have to be careful. If you got done again and went for bail, they could well refuse that because you went on the run.
I'm a good person now, Ronnie.
So you've got to be really good until they make this show illegal, which is probably knowing the government in this country that anything.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's keep positive.
Yeah. So that's why we've got to do as many as possible before it's outlawed.
Yeah. So
anyway.
But for people who are just coming in, this is Mel's name and address, and so he's been either re-remanded or he's been refused bail, and we think until mid January. So please write to him. It does cheer people up, and so it is a good thing to do. So it's Peterborough.
Really important.
So the PE3, that's a postcode in Britain. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, just put the whole. If you're like. That's the address to put, and if you're not in obviously if you're in the UK, you can leave the UK off the end of it. But that will get to Mel if you address it to that one.
Yeah, I'll bring that back up again during the show. So remind me if I forget, Ronnie. Yeah. But okay, so now this today's show with your whatever you said,
SUPREMATRIX.
SUPREMATRIX. Yeah. Okay. Some very fancy mattress.
Yeah.
This came from a clip that you posted on Facebook, which was like a little excerpt from a video that's still not been put out yet, I don't think, Ronnie, or is
it was an interview I did with a reporter for a blog that he was doing. Basically about a campaign against the new church guinea pig breeding place that took place some years ago, and he was interviewing various people in connection with that. And but we strayed on to other areas in the interview, and I kind of I took some clips from it that I thought were interested and posted a couple of them on Facebook.
Yeah, so the interview started with the guy asking you about dedicating one's life to a cause.
Yeah.
And I suppose they're trying to get at that it kind of, in a way, doesn't happen too much. Certainly not, I suppose, in the voluntary way of doing it. So that's how you started with it, wasn't it?
Yes.
About that.
That's it. Yes. Yeah. So have you got it there, Roger? You're gonna?
No, we're not gonna show any of it. I'm just going to mention bits.
Oh, you're just talking about it. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So
show it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like, obviously, I suppose we're both guilty of dedicating most of our lives to the cause, and in a voluntary sense, I suppose. But there's lots of people who've done that, throughout the years, of course, and it's kind of necessary, really, for people to just keep the finger on the button, isn't it? Really, I suppose.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, with see, in the interview, the guy said about dedicating my life to the cause of animal liberation, and kind of I will explain to him why I felt that was so important, and why it was actually vitally important and vitally necessary to do that. And I think that the reason for that was because of my my understanding of the world and how the world operates, and my understanding of what I consider to be the true conditions of existence on this planet, in that what we have is a situation where we have many sentient animal species living on this planet. One of those species has become a tyrant over all the others, and I'm talking about the human, of course, has become the most horrific and unimaginable tyrant over the others, and imposing so much destruction, death, and suffering on on really all the other animals. And that is like the true conditions of existence. That is like the reality of life on Earth, and that's the reality that underlies everything else. That is the actual, that is the true situation on Earth. But it's a situation that, like, the vast majority of people don't appreciate and don't consider, and that is why I compared the situation, the true situation on Earth, to the film the Matrix. Now, probably many people watching this will have watched the Matrix. I mean, I saw it kind of many years ago now, and basically it's a situation where, like, machines control the Earth, but they've kind of they've created a false reality for humans, so that humans don't humans are living in a false reality, so they don't appreciate that the machines are controlling them and kind of exploiting them, so to speak. And that's what's referred to as the Matrix. And for me, I saw it, whether it's meant to be or not, I saw it as a kind of very political film, because for me it was a film about false consciousness, that the machines had created a false consciousness in human beings, so that the lives they were living were not real, and so everything that went on in their lives, whether they had happy moments or sad moments or whatever, none of it was reality. None of it was reality, because there was this underlying horrific situation that nobody appreciated. In fact, very few, some did appreciate it, and in the end, because they battled against the machines, but like the vast majority of people didn't appreciate or realize what was going on, and existed in a false reality through kind of false consciousness. And the idea of false consciousness is often kind of used in a kind of
associated with Marx, isn't it?
Associated with Marxism, that the workers don't understand the conditions of their oppression type of thing. But I see it as like much wider and deeper than that, in relation to the in the relation to how humans have oppressed the other animals on this planet, and that people exist in a false consciousness, have a false consciousness where they don't, that isn't in any way properly taken into consideration at all, and that everything we do is very, very much ignoring. Not all of us, some of us do appreciate what's really going on. For the vast majority of humans, that they exist in a way that totally ignores the true reality, that totally ignores this horrific underlying situation that exists on Earth. And so we need to understand that, and I kind of think it also applies to many people who call themselves vegan. They don't fully appreciate the true conditions of existence. They don't really appreciate the extent and the depth to which other animals are oppressed by humans. And also, if we do appreciate that, if we do appreciate, the true conditions of existence on this planet, that this is horrific oppressor, the horrific situation that exists for all the other animals on the earth, imposed on them by the human, then the only authentic way to live, the only kind of real way to live, is in struggle against that. That's the only way. That's the only way to live when faced with that situation. That's the only way to kind of live a real life. But and so few people do that, including so few vegans.
Well, just to let me kind of jump in and try and clarify a few things, not least for myself, Ronnie, because I've not confession time. I've never seen The Matrix. I've seen all the famous clips, especially the red pill and blue pill bit and all that, and the kind of bending over backwards to avoid a bullet, which is, I'm sure everybody can do that nowadays. So in the film, you're saying it's kind of alien machines, and they're using the humans as like batteries.
Basically, right? Like machines are kind of. I think they're kind of using the humans' life force to sustain themselves, and what they've done is kind of created a false reality in people's minds, so so that the everyday existence for people actually isn't real. It's kind of like almost like a dreamlike state created by the machines, so that everybody goes along thinking that like kind of everything's okay, without realizing that what the true conditions of existence are, that machines control everything. So it's false. It's about false consciousness. People not understanding the reality of
the agent of false consciousness in the Marxist sense is kind of the ruling class. And so you're saying it's these alien.
In the Matrix, it's the machines that have created the false consciousness.
Yeah, and they're taking advantage of the humans, and they're making sure that the humans don't know they're being oppressed.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So how does that fit to the situation of ours, where we are the ones doing the oppression? Well, because you kind of suggest that there's one species that has dominated. You use a tyrant species thing there.
Yeah.
But you also suggesting that we're unaware of it, or
what I'm suggesting is people aren't properly aware of it, and it's ignored. I mean, if you take, for instance, now I the newspaper that I read in this country's The Guardian, which is kind of thought of as being probably the most left wing of the kind of popular newspapers, I suppose. And I don't really get the newspaper. I look at the app. I scroll through the app to just briefly see the news. And there's all these stories in different stories in there. Stories about tragedies. Stories about sport. Stories about good things that happen, bad things that happen. Right. And all these things, but there's nothing, hardly anything ever at all about what is being done to other animals by humans. And yet that is overwhelmingly more serious than any of those other stories in that newspaper. It's overwhelming when you consider that it's 50,000 animals a second are slaughtered for food. That's just not for food. That's just for food, and that's ignoring all the billions that are suffering and dying because of adverse human impact on the environment. Such as the climate crisis, and then there's all those that are hunted, all those in laboratories, etc., etc., etc. So you've got this number that could be approaching perhaps 100,000 animals a second, other animals a second, killed, suffering and dying because of what humans are doing, right? And like that should be the number one focus of everything. It should be the number one priority of political parties. It should be the number one news story every day in every single newspaper. It massively outweighs in its seriousness anything else that's in those publications. And it should be the number one concern for all of us. The number one thing that's at the forefront of the minds of all of us is to combat this horrific situation, to end that horrific situation. But it's hardly anywhere to be seen. It's hardly anywhere to be seen in the media, and it's hardly anywhere to be seen in the everyday lives of ordinary people, including the everyday lives of most people who consider themselves vegan. Because with most people consider themselves vegan, right, how much of their time is spent in struggle, in campaigning, in spreading the vegan message, in trying to end this unimaginable horror that is going on, the reality of our existence. Hardly any, like kind of what happens is people treat veganism as an add-on. It's an add-on. I've got this life where I'm doing all these things, and a lot of the things I do are meaningless. There are things people have to do in their life. People have to go to work, people have families have to care for and stuff, like things they have to do. But when all that's done, most of people's time is spent in doing meaningless things, really, watching shit on the telly, going and watching some blokes or women, more so these days, kicking a ball around into a net, and all these things that are meaningless that people spend all their so-called spare time doing. When this horrific situation of oppression of other sentient beings going on, of which our species is to blame, and for which we are all in a sense responsible because we are members of the oppressor species. And yet what happens is, veganism is treated as an add-on. The people have this life where they're doing all this kind of meaningless stuff, and they think, oh right, okay, I found out about what kind of happens to other animals, so I'm going to kind of go vegan. I'm going to not I'm going to avoid involvement in those things. I'm not going to buy animal products. I'm not going to go to the circus. I'm not going to bet on a racing. I'm going to avoid all these things, right? And then once that's done, then they just get on. That's just added on. That's just an add-on to their ordinary life, where they continue doing all these meaningless things. But that's nowhere near enough. It's nowhere near enough in the situation we existed, in this horrific situation of what I would call the SUPREMATRIX. We need authentic life. When faced with those conditions of existence, authentic life can only be lived in struggle and in campaigning to end it. That's the only way to live properly.
I'm still a bit unsure about whether you're saying that we know what we're doing or we don't know what we're doing.
Well, it's something that's ignored. It's something that's ignored. The situation in the Matrix was that people, apart from a very, very few, didn't know didn't appreciate what was going on, didn't appreciate the real conditions of existence, right? And that is very similar to what we have at the moment. Yes, you could say that, yes, people, there is some degree of awareness of what happens to other animals, but it's suppressed, it's ignored, it's pushed out of the way. It features hardly anywhere in kind of everyday discourse. And so it's very, very similar to what went on in the Matrix, in that film. That we live in a false reality.
You drew a parallel also with the French Resistance, didn't you?
Yes. What I said was, of course, you had. I said that it's similar to, like, say, during the war, France was occupied by the Nazis, and yet, in a sense, there was a parallel in that. Yes, of course, people were aware that their country was occupied by the Nazis, but only about 2% of the adult population of France in any way were involved with the resistance. And I say in any way resolved. I'm not talking about those that actually actively fought, but I'm talking about people that offered support in other ways. Only 2%, right? And it's a kind of similar situation that shows how people in situations of tyranny and oppression, that so few people will kind of take any sort of action. People just get their head down and carry on and do all the little things that they've always done, all the meaningless things mostly that they've always done, in the face of the most horrendous tyranny. And the tyranny that's, committed against other animals massively outweighs the tyranny that the Nazis committed against other humans. Not that I want to kind of, lessen that in any way, that, it was horrific, and, what the Nazis did was absolutely appalling. But in comparison, when we think about 50,000, possibly double that number of animals that are slaughtered, that die, suffer and die because of our species every second of every day, then
the parallel that you were making, though, Ronnie, was not, was the fact that even once they were occupied, only a few fought back, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
Everybody else got on with it, as it
and
were.
It's and it's comparable to kind of really kind of what's happening today. In terms, I would say probably mainly to do with, in a sense, the vegan community, because many of those people in France, some of they wouldn't give. They were collaborators, of course, who collaborated with the Nazis, but most people there didn't do anything to support the Nazis, but they didn't do anything to combat them either. And this is very much, I would say, this situation with the vegan community. In what's happening, people are trying not to support the oppression of other animals in their everyday life. They're trying to avoid involvement in it. But faced with the situation that we're in, with this horrific oppression, that still isn't living properly. The only way to actually live properly when faced with the horror that is being committed against other animals is to be involved in struggle. And I would say that a most vital part of that struggle is vegan education, so that we can educate enough people to become vegans, so that we kind of then have the ability to control what goes on and change the situation.
Yeah, well, if you're inviting people to reassess what it means to have an authentic life, because you use phrases like inauthentic living and everything.
Yes.
See, in terms of our socialization, kind of a bit of sociology, is that the authentic life is to be a family person, is to, care for your family, make sure you make a good living, get yourself a decent house, and all those kind of functional things. Now that is authentic living. Now you're going to say that's the kind of story that the system gives you to put you into the false consciousness, right?
That's the suprematrix. That's living with. You see, things take place within the suprematrix. Stuff takes place within the suprematrix, where it takes place in a situation of ignorance of what's kind of really happening. Ignorance of the far great, massively greater the evil and wrongfulness that's going on underneath everything all the time. Even if you get a terrible tragedy.
Are you buying into the idea that people just don't know what we do to other animals?
People ignore it and are encouraged to ignore it. That's the problem.
Well, that's different from not knowing, though, isn't it?
Well, it's different from absolutely not knowing, but it's similar in the sense that people behave as if they don't know what's going on. It's not knowing. There's ignorance is there's ignorance and not knowing, and in some ways they're similar. In some ways they're not, because ignorance kind of implies that, you know, ignoring something that you kind of do.
Oh well,
know.
yeah. I mean, you're up my street now, Ronnie, because I mean, one of my lectures I talk about the sociological understanding about knowledge is the fact that there's some things to do with knowledge which is not know it, and you can willfully not know things. But usually that is a kind of defense mechanism, in the sense that, you know, you push things that you don't want to know, or it's not in your interest to know, away as a defensive thing, because it's not functional for you to know that. And in fact, somebody did say, and because your thing so far has created quite a lot of talk, one thing that came up was the idea about are you when you're applying all this to vegans, are you ignoring the fact that burnout is real? That was one of the questions.
Well, burnout. Well, yes, but like, there's no chance of burnout if you don't do bugger all, is there? No chance of burnout if you're not an activist, is there? And this is, you know, the problem is that, you know, so few vegans are activists, even on the most simple level of, like, you know, distributing leaflets or something like that. And I think I think the kind of I think it's kind of quite easy to avoid burnout. I think it's very easy to kind of do stuff that spreads vegan message, which is very, very low stress. I mean, I tend to I go for low stress. I don't want, at my age, I don't want no stress. I don't want no aggro. I'll stick to to very quiet ways of spreading the vegan message, but I think they're just as effective as the kind of
but there was a more fundamental thing that came up, I think, Ronnie, which was you were asked about, and you said that this has changed for you over your life. You were asked about the pain of knowing about what was going on, and of course that is the very reason why some people don't really want to engage with the details, and they don't want to engage with, you know, so some people, I think, that are reluctant to get involved with vegan education, for example, because they feel as though they've got to know all the details. You know, remember back in the 80s, you know, every 6 seconds an animal dies in a laboratory. You kind of had all these figures. You just mentioned the thing about per second. Now, in a way, who wants to have that bounce around in their head?
I think the thing is, I mean, there's a couple of things that, you know, to address the comment that what I'm saying is that, like, I mean, you know, everyone does need a break and everyone needs relaxation, but we've all got spare time that we can devote to campaigning for other animals, and we've all got spare time, every one of us, that we can devote to spreading the vegan message, right? And I think the idea of, yes, you know, we do have to be aware, at least to some extent, of what goes on before we can, you know, before we can go out and educate other people. But that doesn't mean we constantly have to subject ourselves, you know, to that kind of horror. You know, once we're aware of it. I mean, I don't watch anything. I won't watch any video or look at any images that portray the slaughter and suffering of other animals. I deliberately avoid those things. There's no need for me to look at those things, because I already know what's going on. I'm already aware of that. And I would really counsel against people looking at those things. You don't need to. If you're vegan already, it's not you that needs to see those things. It's non-vegans that need to see those things, not you. And you don't constantly, you know, become absorbed in look at those things, because that will cause you harm, and there's no need to do it. It's really about working towards solutions. We know what goes on, so kind of how do we deal with it? And the way we deal with it primarily, I would say, is to educate more people to go vegan. We don't have to constantly...
What I just add to that bit about the material is that I think it's a way that we encounter it or consume it that counts. For example, if you're on the street with a laptop and people come up. I mean, they've done that with our stalls in Liverpool, and they ask questions. You're kind of seeing the images, but you're talking about it, and you're kind of at work there. It's a little bit the same as if you're editing a video. I mean, I've edited a video about animal use in Ireland, and if you're actually working with the material, that's one thing, and it's hard enough. But I think if you just sat there passively watching it, that's the worst thing you can do. And I think that's what you're getting at.
And I think a lot of people do that, and I think they sometimes kind of see that as a substitute for activism. I mean, watching, you know,
or a duty. Some people have said to me that they feel it's a duty to do it.
No, it's the duty is to get out there and educate others to go vegan, is to get out there and campaign. That I would say is the duty, and that I would say is kind of, you know, the way we kind of live authentically. I mean, how can anyone live authentically when they ignore the true conditions of existence, when they ignore the true horror of what's going on and don't do anything about it? How can that in any way be an authentic life, despite whatever else we have to do in our lives? If we don't devote any time to struggling against the oppression of other animals, then we're not living properly. We can't say that we're living properly.
I think one problem that we get in a problem with this situation is reflected in it was noted by social movement theorists and sociologists that the reaction of people to a demonstration was often things like shouting words or slogans like "get a life" or "get a job" at the demonstrators, right?
Yeah.
And then they realized that one of the reasons why they were doing that, apart from just being rude, I suppose, was the fact that people in their head have this social category, which is like demonstrator or protester. And the way that they articulated their knowledge of that would be that they would say things like, oh, well, you know, if they weren't protesting about this, they'll be protesting about that. It's as though these were like professional, or they have a propensity, I can't say that word, to actually do activism on some level. And if it wasn't one thing, it'll be the other. But the real problem with that is that for the people who have got this negative attitude towards those people, you know, the activists and the protesters, is that they can rule themselves out of being that themselves. And in some ways, you're almost like suggesting that that's even going on in the vegan movement a little bit.
I think what's going on in the vegan movement. I mean, first of all, I think people that have this really strong reaction against protests and that they may well be a lost cause anyway. And the thing is, we don't have to change everyone. We just have to change enough people to enable us to run the show, really, and that isn't everyone. So we don't have to change everyone. Just a considerable, you know, just a substantial minority, I would say, before we can be the one that has to say so. But I would say that I think the difficulty with a lot of vegans these days is they think that just becoming a person who avoids things is enough, and that they can then get on with like normal everyday life, because you see, it's much more easy to do that now. You know, back in the day, you know, when I first became vegan in the 70s and then into the 80s, at that time, it was kind of much harder to kind of live socially as a vegan. In other words, you know, a lot of things that we could consider like kind of normal life were more difficult when you were a vegan. It was like really difficult to eat out, like everywhere around animal product. You didn't get the vegan options that you get today. A lot of food products that are now contained vegetable oil, contained animal fat in those days. There was a lot less kind of understanding in society about veganism, for instance. So there was all these ways that acted to kind of isolate vegans from ordinary society. you see. And so vegans tended to kind of not socialize. The lives of vegans in those days weren't for the most part as conventional as they are now. People weren't able really to live conventionally so easily in those days. You couldn't fit in being a vegan so easily into kind of everyday life. So the people who were vegans tended to be kind of tougher people, tended to be people that didn't give a shit about not fitting in, you know, and so therefore those people tended to be more likely to be activists.
There was some pretty good support networks. I mean, we've already talked about, you know, it was tied up with the squatting scene, so there was quite a lot of communal things going on.
Yes.
There's a lot of mutual aid going on.
Yeah.
There's lots of sharing.
They were more radical type activities where there would be some more understanding from other people, even than those people maybe themselves weren't vegan. But you see, nowadays, because you know you've got all the vegan options, because you can buy all the, you know, all this kind of vegan processed food that's kind of, you know, trying to, you know, simulate cheese and meat and all these things. It's so much easier now to kind of live a conventional life and be vegan, right? So what people tend to do is they just, you know, they're going along living in life. They think, oh dear, that's terrible, what's happening to the animals, I'm going to go vegan. Right, I'll go vegan, I'm going to avoid all that, and then I'll just carry on just with my life the same as before. We didn't do that. When you became vegan back in the day, your whole life changed. You could no longer live conventionally because it was like so difficult. It's completely different now. And so therefore, I think that makes it easy for people to just treat veganism as some kind of add-on and for them not to be campaigners.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And it kind of, I mean, a lot of that chimes with my own experience of, you know, just getting involved with the activist community, but it was much more of a community, I suppose. Even though ironically there was less of us, it was more communal. Again, I'm just going to break off, Ronnie, and remind people, especially people who might have joined in late, that Mel Broughton, a long-time activist in Britain, has been either refused bail or remanded. And it's going to be over Christmas and the New Year, and probably into the mid-January. So if people want to send Mel a card or a letter, it's always great to receive anything. You don't have to know Mel. You can just say how you're doing, you know, and a few things about your life, especially if you're doing a bit of campaigning. You'd like to hear about all that.
That's the
also,
most.
Benny mentioned that there was another prisoner he mentioned, but if you contact Jake Conroy, the Cranky Vegan, he'll probably be able to put you onto a website in particular. In fact, that I think there's an annual kind of calendar that is produced, which got all the names and addresses of all the political prisoners that people can.
The ALF Supporters Group website. If people go to that. Just type it into a search engine.
Okay, yeah.
That has lists of animal rights prisoners. I think not just here in the UK, but throughout the world. And so there are others we've tended to have very few prisoners here in this country because the kind of amount of kind of illegal activity has very much gone down. But in other countries, in some there are still a few.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, that at one point we had more than 100 prisoners. We
had 200 at one time. Yeah, there was loads. Way back in the. I know when I was in prison in the 80s, there's like loads of other animal rights prisoners, just masses of them. People were being arrested on these big raids.
In the good old days, eh?
And stuff. Yeah. I think the thing you said about people, the thing I wanted to know most in letters was what activism people were doing. Now, if anyone's doing anything illegal, do not put that in the letter, please. But other sorts of stuff, and campaigning the stuff that people are doing.
I just smashed a butcher shop window on my address.
That's it, yeah. Because the letters are very often read by the prison authorities. This is what you have to kind of take into consideration. But that's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know what activism, despite me being locked away, stuff was still going on.
Actually, that's one aspect of prison life people probably don't appreciate, the fact that you used to get your letters and they were already opened, weren't they? And
they're
then
already open.
When you were sending a letter out, you had to put it into the mailbox, but you couldn't seal it because they would read it and then seal it, wouldn't they?
They don't read every word. They kind of scan through, and they're looking for things like,
keywords like Ronnie Lee told me to do it.
That's it. Yeah. They're looking for drugs. I suppose some people could try and put drugs in a letter and stuff like that. It's not just the written word that they're kind of looking at, but it's really important to not put anything in a letter to a prisoner that would in any way kind of get you in trouble with the law, I would say.
So going back to because we're probably we've got about 8 minutes. So going back to your thesis, I suppose you're talking about the difference between woke in its original meaning and being asleep, right? And so
woke means kind of awake, and we have to be careful of that word because it's used in connection these days with conspiracy theories.
That's why I said the
very sadly
meaning.
Like for some reason during COVID, because they probably got nothing else to do, I know quite a few vegans that have gone down the wormhole of conspiracy theories, which is kind of tragic because the biggest the biggest conspiracy in the world is to keep the truth of what I'm talking about. The biggest conspiracy in the world is the SUPREMATRIX. Biggest conspiracy in the world is this huge effort to not talk about, to keep it quiet about the true conditions of existence on the planet, where this massive oppression of all other animals by our species. The conspiracy all the time is to keep that quiet. Why isn't that headlines every day? Why isn't it the main policy of all political parties? Why is this horrific, overwhelming horror just kept so quiet? That's the conspiracy. That's the conspiracy we all need to combat.
Well, you do have that thing, obviously, that slaughterhouses tend to be hidden away and behind poplar trees and this kind of stuff, and so they don't kind of advertise themselves. But it's not as though you go into every supermarket and you've got it all laid out there like a morgue. It's not as though it's kind of
but it's laid out in you've got a situation where all this meat and stuff is like finely wrapped and packaged, and nothing, very little is ever said to kind of challenge or question that. It's like I'm saying, how often in the newspaper do you get a story about what happens to other animals? It's all about the human. It's all about what happens to humans, the good and the bad things that happen to humans. And yet overwhelmingly what's happening on this earth is the oppression of other animals by our species. That's the number one news item every day, isn't it? And yet it kind of, or should be, but like it never is. And this is what I mean, this suppression of the truth, this suppression of the true situation. It's, ignoring of the true situation of what's going on in this planet. And we're the only people we're the people that can bring it to light. It's us vegans that can bring it to light by the spreading of information to people, to kind of get people, everyone to be aware, so that people act accordingly, and we can totally change things around, and we can end this. We can put an end to these like thousands of years of human tyranny, and we can create an animal liberationist society. And the only people that can do that are vegans. Non-vegans aren't going to educate people to go vegan. It's the task of all vegans to become active in whatever way we can, even if it's in a small way, just using a little bit of our spare time that we've got. And even if it's in a small way, like distributing leaflets. If people want to do big things, you like go on the animal rebellion stuff and stuff, all that, that's brilliant. If you're able to do that, great, go for it. If you're not, there's loads of stuff you can do. It really is the duty of all of us, when faced with a horrific situation that our species is responsible for. It's actually the duty of all humans to combat that. But people that aren't vegan, their first step in combating that is to become vegan. And the duty of vegans is to be involved in the process of educating and persuading others to go vegan. And that is the way we turn the situation round. That is the way we end human tyranny and bring about animal liberation. And that is the only way to live an authentic life.
Going back to the prison thing, that's a yes, isn't it, Ronnie? That prisons in the UK.
I don't know. I think the answer is probably no, or if they do, it's very limited in terms of maybe attending computer classes and things like that. I don't think there's general internet access. If there is, I think it would be restricted in some way.
But they have TV access now. I suppose,
they've got TV. There's TVs in the cells now. They've got TV, and I think they get used to the telephone. I don't think they're allowed mobile phones, but they're certainly, even when I was in prison, they started bringing it in where there was a payphone that you could use, and like a landline to phone people.
That was all before my day, Ronnie. But one issue that there's been some talk. It was on my Facebook page about recent campaigns by animal activists have been talking about bird flu and the kind of diseases that are being transmitted to humans, and that if we don't do something about the situation, then there's going to be another pandemic and everything. Now, in a way, that's not answering your issue, is it? Because it's not focused on the other animals.
It depends what that leads on to. It depends if that's being used as a kind of as a gateway. In other words, that you kind of you attract people's attention by saying, look, if we don't stop consuming animal products, there's going to be another pandemic, which there kind of certainly will be. You can attract people's attention through that, but then I think you've got to then talk about the fact that it's wrong for other animals to be oppressed. The reason to go vegan is for other animals, is to end the oppression of other animals. That's really the only, that's what veganism is all about, animal liberation. So I think it depends what follows on. If there's a leaflet about about the dangers of another pandemic through animal farming, for instance, or a video about that, I think the value of it really depends on what is said after that initial attracting people's attention.
Yeah, well, I think that the only way around that would be to use the kind of phraseology of someone like Reagan and say, yeah, okay, so this is what's going on, but the fundamental wrong is X, Y, and Z. And so I'm not quite sure whether that. And the other thing, of course, is that if you're relying on the mass media to get that message over, then good luck, because the mass media are not subtle enough to do that. Really.
That's why we have to produce our own media. We have to be the agents of the spreading of that information, and that is why we,
the agents of agitation, Ronnie.
The agents of agitation, and because we've got the numbers. See, they've got the money. They've got the money to pay for adverts. They've got the money, the power to control, TV stations and everything. What we've got is the numbers. But there's huge numbers of people now consider themselves vegans. Just think if everyone who consider themselves vegan became active in spreading vegan information, whatever way they can. Just think how much information would go out there to combat the propaganda that's coming from the other side. And that's what we need to do. They've got the money. We've got the numbers. We need to use our numbers.
So it's a shame you don't have a little model in mind to illustrate this, really, isn't it, Ronnie? So
a model. I don't know. I don't really.
More vegan,
at my age, I don't have a lot to do with models, to be quite honest.
Right. Well. So
maybe I'd probably kill me. Anyway.
So you just put that up for the last time.
Yeah, for the last time. It's really important. Please support. Mel's a great guy. He's a guy that's dedicated his life to animal liberation. The guy has been to prison for many years previously you know, and he's someone I very much admire. And I think it's like really important to give him support at this difficult time for him.
Actually, Mel is going to feature on Wednesday in my time tunnel because I'm going to tell the story about a dolphin who was named Rocky. And then that led to all these dolphinariums being closed down in Britain.
Eventually, yeah. And
yeah.
Mel played a major part through Mel's actions, and I won't kind of say too much, so because I want people to watch your time tunnel. But you know, Mel played a major part in that. Major part in the fact that all these places are, you know, no longer operate.
Yes, and also Barry Horn, of course, but
Barry as well, yeah.
So
people often don't know that about Barry, they, you know, because obviously the attention tends to be on his hunger strikes.
Yeah. Okay, people. Thank you for your very active commentary and debate and discourse that was going on in the chat. Sorry if we've missed anything that you regard as vital, which is always possible because it was moving along quite healthily at one point. So, Ronnie, so I was going to say try and escape from the whatever matrix thing you were talking about, but I can't say it.
Try and escape from the mattress. Well, it's more at my age. It's sometimes quite difficult to escape from the mattress.
Yeah.
I should probably have a lie down after this.
That's probably harder for us nowadays.
Yes.
Right, keep away from those mattresses, folks. So
that's it. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you. Well, we're not quite sure about next week, are we? Because of the what is it?
It's Boxing Day.
Boxing Day, St. Stephen's Day,
or whatever else it is.
Yeah, there's lots of different things, but you call it Boxing Day, and that's when people in Britain used to open their presents, isn't it?
I think that's probably why. Yeah,
that's
or else it could be that's the day they fight. You know, when you get families together at Christmas, maybe that's when they fight. It's Boxing Day.
I think probably in the modern age they've had to bring the present opening a day early because they know they'll be fighting by the second day, and so
second day, yeah. I don't know.
I don't know though. You know, if they kept it presents on Boxing Day, people might stay civil for an extra day just to
so they could get their present.
Yeah.
So the person wouldn't take the present away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you just find that during the Christmas period, there's less and less presents underneath the tree. Because people are pissed off with each other.
And I mean, of course, once again, you see, you know, once again, this is, you know, Christmas is held within this SUPREMATRIX because it's ignored the vast suffering and slaughter of animals, you know, in connection with Christmas is very, very largely ignored. How many million turkeys are slaughtered and all the other animals, you know, and once again, everyone
about turkey flesh is that survey after survey suggests that most people don't like it, and yet they buy it. They keep buying it every year, and so that goes to show about how.
But so, you know, I read something where it said, "Oh, pigs in blankets are like more popular than turkey this year," but there's still other animals being, you know, being oppressed and being slaughtered, and all this is going on. Everyone's having a good time. Whoa, you know, let's get pissed up and whoa, open me present and all that. All that's going on, right? In ignorance of this horror that's kind of carrying on underneath it all. You're in ignorance of all those animals that are slaughtered that continue to be so. You know,
what about the argument that we're not ignorant of it? It's just that we don't see it as a problem.
Well, I think people. It's pushed away. It's massively played down. It's kind of
suppressed,
isn't it? It's suppressed, and it's suppressed in a sense by what you might call.
Well, you've certainly got the ideology of animal welfare to make it easier on the eyes and the ears, because you're kind of going, well, don't worry, they're all looked after wonderfully, and they only have one bad day and all the rest of it. And so there is that. But then again, if we are going to exploit systematically and routinely all these other animals, then not only are we going to mock them, but we're also going to lie about it.
Yeah,
in fact, one of the things that Joan Denea said in Speciesism, that speciesism relies on lies in the same way.
Yeah, it lies on lies and on camouflage, on all these things. But you see, it's in practical terms, like what do we do about it? I mean, specifically with reference to Christmas. I mean, what we've done locally in our vegan group, we've given out, we've probably door dropped, I think, about 3,000 leaflets this year, urging people to go vegan at Christmas and stay vegan afterwards. We've ran a couple of adverts on social media along the same lines. There are, we can all try to do something about this to kind of make people aware of the true situation of kind of what happens at Christmas and for Christmas and indeed all the year round with regard to the oppression of other animals. And we need to fight back. We need to fight back against the suprematrix by kind of doing that, by like breaking through through this kind of ice of, which is particularly relevant.
I made a sarcastic, well, kind of like a cynical post on Facebook the other day, because I noticed that every time you go on social media now, you're getting all these charities popping up, as they do, because in some weird way, they're kind of hoping that this season of goodwill idea is going to kind of rub off on enough people that they're going to be able to send some money to a charity, as though what's really needed, or not needed, which is that every period should be a season of goodwill.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that we mark out a part of the year for all that is just ludicrous.
This is the season of goodwill. The rest of the year is bad will, when we're all arseholes. Is that what it's supposed to be?
I don't know. That's what it implies, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just nuts, isn't it? I mean, I think in a sense that kind of one of the things we've done a lot this year, and obviously it's from an environmental point of view, it's much better, is to kind of what we've done is, with quite a lot of people as Christmas presents, we've like adopted an animal at a sanctuary for them. If you see what I mean, that's a good way of like raising funds to sanctuary and giving someone like I mean, every day, my brother-in-law's birthday, every day I give him the continued adoption of a pig at one of our local sanctuaries, and he's quite happy with that. You know what I mean? And, this is a way of helping other animals at the same time and like helping the environment. By
a rescued pig in a blanket. So that'll be good.
A rescued pig in a warm.
So three quick announcements to make to finish is don't forget Mel Broughton here on the screen. Also, if you're watching on a platform which is other than vegan, of course, YouTube, then please pop over there and subscribe, because the best present for Sky would be to get to 1,000 subscriptions before New Year. And then finally, in about 50 minutes, the Animal Rights Show has got a special presentation coming up as well. So with all that done, I'm going to say goodbye so I can get myself all freshened up for part 2. So goodbye, everyone. You take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. See you soon.